Oh, okay. We'll put on our party faces now.
Gustavo,
Yes.
I can see the Luger back in the wall.
See, it's still there. See, over here.
Okay, let's be serious now.
Oh, we have the RAC president here too as well.
Okay, YouTube is working now, finally.
Put on our party faces now.
Gustavo, okay,
Yes.
I can see the Luger back in the wall.
See, it's over there. I show you. See, it's here.
Hello, Glenn.
He's still muted.
I'm going to be letting in everybody else, okay?
Yep.
Yes.
There we go.
Hi, George.
Good evening. Oh, Sterling's joining us. Good.
Hi there.
Good.
Oh, I should turn my camera on, I guess. Should I do that?
Yep. Perfect. And we're live on YouTube also. And we already have 2 people there.
Aha.
Good.
So, the issue is gone at least. That's good.
Oh, Sterling's joining us. Good.
Hi, Glenn.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to have all of you here. Thanks for joining in.
Yeah, here they come.
Yep. Yeah, the number also in YouTube is climbing steadily.
Excellent.
Good. Yep. And we already have 20 people in here. So we're good to go.
Okay, I was going to wait another minute or two and then we'll start
That's fine.
because we're still picking some people up.
Yep.
You're driving this, Augusto, right? In terms of admissions?
Yeah, I'm letting everybody in. And you know, one thing I think I will just disable the waiting room so everybody who wants to join in will go straight in.
Yeah, please do. Please do, and then we can get
Done.
started.
Yep. That is done. Now there's no waiting room, so everybody who joins in will go straight into the room.
Okay, so we got 21 here and whoever's on YouTube.
Yeah, we have 5 people on YouTube right now.
Okay, well, that was basically the registration. Okay, well, let me begin then. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to another one of the IARU Region 2 workshops. I think this is now number 6. We started off saying we do a couple of workshops, and the combination of the pandemic and general interest, we've now been running a workshop every Wednesday evening, some in English and some in Spanish. So tonight we're doing an English workshop, which is why I'm your host. When we do a Spanish workshop, generally Ramon Santoyo, XE1 Kilo Kilo, who's the Region 2 president, would normally provide, would be the host. I am the Region 2 secretary. Anyhow, before I get started here, I just want to introduce a few other people on the call. I see that we have Vishnu, Yankee Bravo Zero Alpha Zulu, who's way ahead of us because it's tomorrow morning very early for him already in Indonesia. He is president of Region 3. We have several of our officers and board members from the Region 2 executive, Jose Arturo, Yankee Sugar 1 Mike Sugar, who is the vice president. We have Augusto Franco, Papa Tango 2 Alpha Delta Mike.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I can't remember. And let's see, anybody else here to note other than Augusto, who is OA4 Delta Oscar Hotel, and he is our workshops coordinator, and he's the guy who's been making us work so hard. Have a few other people here that we have Rod Stafford from W6 Radio Oscar Delta. Rod has been an IARU Region 2 support man many decades. I think it's been decades. He's now Vice President International Affairs at ARL. We also have the President of Radio Amateurs of Canada, Glenn, VE3 X-Ray Radio Alpha, who's here. So we've got an interesting crowd. So before we get started, for those of you who haven't participated in one of these before, what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a very brief introduction on what IARU is. And for those of you who may not know, although looking at the crowd and the call signs, I think most of you do, IARU, the International Amateur Radio Union, is an umbrella organization representing amateurs worldwide, and it represents amateurs through their member society. So if you're in the US, that's ARL. If you're in Canada, that would be Radio Amateurs of Canada, and so on. Individuals are not directly members of IARU, but are members through their member society. And the purpose of IARU is to represent amateur radio to the ITU at the World Radio Conferences, specifically to protect and gain spectrum for amateur radio. Particularly important in today's mobile communications world because amateurs don't pay big license fees for spectrum the way commercial users do. And governments love to sell something that they don't have to pay anything for, which is called radio spectrum. So we have a very difficult job in protecting the allocations we already have, and we've been very successful in also gaining some others. In addition, we have a number of other missions, primarily promotion of amateur radio, developing of amateur radio, and developing our capabilities in emergency communications, and increasingly more emphasis on youth and STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math education as an important adjunct, because if you look at some of the pictures, not true of everyone here, but there are quite a few who have hair which is white or maybe has already left them. So that definitely presents a challenge, because obviously those of us who enjoy amateur radio don't want to see our generation be the last ones who are enjoying amateur radio. If you aren't a member of your member society, I encourage you to join and support your member society. They work directly with your government agencies, with your regulator, which has a lot of influence on your ability to operate as an amateur. Tonight, I'm going to introduce our speaker. I will say what we'd like to do, if you don't mind, please hold your questions until the end of his presentation. Give him a chance to go through it, and then Augusto will be the ringmaster, and he will handle the questions. For those of you watching on YouTube, we're more than happy to also take your questions by using the YouTube chat feature. So please don't feel you can't fully participate as well. You will find you have about a 20-second delay to the live broadcast. So if for some reason you don't get an immediate response, that's part of the reason. Okay, let me introduce our speaker tonight, Anthea Luskri, Kilo 8 Zulu Tango. He's been licensed since 1983. He's a QRP operator, a very hardcore one. And his favorite operating activities are QRP, whether it's contesting, DXing, rag chewing, he really doesn't care. And mode, he doesn't care either, CW phone or digital modes. He does a little bit of everything. And he's pretty hardcore in contests. He's finished in the top 10 in a number of major contests, and has finished first in a couple of CQ worldwide as well. Okay, we need to, Augusto, have you killed everybody's audio? Okay, we still need to kill Glenn's audio there. Not mine. Thank you. Not my audio, everybody else's. Okay. Professionally, he's recently retired, 20 years as a medical technologist working in clinical microbiology, and another 20 years as a computer technology coordinator. In addition to all his ham radio activities, he also is a trainman on the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad in the Cleveland area, and works in the ARL Ohio section as a youth coordinator and working specifically with schools to get radio technology into their programs. He lives near Akron, Ohio. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anthony and say thank you very much for agreeing to present tonight. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much, George, and thank you, Augusta, for setting this all up. I have a lot of slides tonight, and I'm going to go ahead and jump into screen sharing right off the bat here. Now, I have to warn you about a couple things with my slide presentation, which you'll see in a few moments here. So this is the picture that I've been posting that's gotten the most attention. This actually was a VW bus mask that I took. I just colored it in and made a few changes to it to make it official for Field Day this year. It was coincidental that this was the Field Day logo this year with the bus on it, and that worked out very well. This is my QSL card, my new one on the bottom, my old QSL card on the top, and here's me in my uniform. All the slides today are at a slideshow that you can get to from tiny.cc/FDSD. That's tiny.cc/Foxtrot Delta Sierra Delta. And this slideshow not only has over 130 slides in it, it also has a number of different links to other resources in it. So I sort of lied with 100 slides because it's now over 130. And I keep updating this as we go along, as I get more suggestions, questions, etc. So this is a constantly growing document. All the opinions I'm going to be expressing tonight are mine. They're not those of the IARU, the ARRL, or anyone else. And I hate the ugly blue underline links in my presentations when I'm doing live. So most of the time I'll use a serif font, and you'll find that throughout it. Because this talk has gotten so long, I've actually added a little table of contents at the beginning here that you can click and jump to any specific area. So let's jump into the talk itself. The purpose of this slideshow was originally because I had a club contact me and said, what are we going to do about Field Day this year? We don't think we're going to be able to do our typical 5A operation. So I put together about a 20 or 30 slide show and got it ready for them. And then it just kept growing beyond that point. But the main thing is I want to encourage people who are not taking part in traditional group field days this year to operate as individuals so that they can still be on the air during Field Day. And I also want to stress the fact that we need to adhere to the idea of being adaptive in responding to Field Day, just as we would any other emergency. So hopefully this will build even more emergency communication capability into the ham community as individuals take the time to learn what they need to do to be active without the infrastructure of a club supporting them. As I said, if you have additional ideas or questions or comments, you feel free to add those. I do keep updating the slideshow. This link right here is the ARRL's official Field Day site. That's where you can get all the official rules, all the information you want. Everything is there, and that supersedes anything I might say or anyone else says, and that's being updated too as they make changes. As I said earlier, traditionally, Field Day has been a group activity, and it's one of the group activities where many hams had their first exposure to HF, to contesting, maybe to setting up a tower, putting together a beam. So it was a very much not only an operating event, but it was an educational event for all involved. In addition, it's quite often a social event with picnics and other festivities going along with it. Unfortunately, with social distancing this year, that aspect is the part that's going to suffer the most. The question always comes up when we're talking about Field Day, is it a contest or is it an emergency communications event? And if you ask clubs and individuals, you'll get 1,000 different answers, and they vary between those two extremes. I like the quote from Stan, K4SBZ. It is not a test of MCOM, it's a demonstration of MCOM. In other words, it is a PR event to demonstrate to the public what we can do, not only for MCOM, but also other activities in amateur radio. So I think this is a very good thing to keep in mind, not to get hung up on the aspect that it's a competition or that it's an emergency communication situation. We have other things to deal with both of those. So I think what we need to do is focus on the fact that it's a demonstration. It's also a training aspect. It's also very good. It's also a very good thing for the clubs who do this planning every year. It's a good planning project for them to start planning out a project, carrying it through, having people involved in that. So it's a very good training aspect in that way. So the Podunk Amateur Radio Club has been a feature on many covers of QST magazine, and many times it's been featuring the Podunk Amateur Radio Club's field day activities. So we can see here one of the most important aspects is always the planning ahead of time. Who's going to provide what equipment and how it's going to be made available at field day site. And then we see a nice non-socially distanced field day gathering here in 1957 with the Podunk Amateur Radio Club. So let's take a look at some of the alternatives to this traditional type of group activity of field day. Now, one of the things that's very important in field day is deciding what class you're going to operate under. And the class basically describes what conditions the station's set up as and how it operates. These have to do with both equipment setup and power to run the equipment. In addition to that, there's a number that's assigned based on the number of simultaneous signals on the air at any given time. So Class A is the traditional group of 3 or more people, and it can be even 100 people or more. And it involves a setup that does not use permanent stations or permanently installed instructors for field day, and it all has to be inside of a 1,000-foot circle. Class A is typically the class used by most clubs, and in a typical year, they would be the predominant number of stations that you would hear calling during the contest. I expect a big decrease in Class A stations with the social distancing taking place. Now, a Class B station is 1 or 2 people with a portable field day setup operated, and it can be operated by no more than 2 people, but it can also be done by 1 person. Most of the provisions are the same as a Class A station, with the difference in the number of people. Now, this is less problematic for social distancing, but sometimes the problem is going to be the locations that many people would travel to for a Class B operation have been closed, or maybe the restroom facilities are closed. My wife and I travel around the country for field day each year, and I operate as Class B, and she knows the rules about picking the location. I want a state that only has 1 section in it. It has to be a state where there's not very many hams active so that I can add to the number. So places like Vermont, West Virginia, Montana, Maine have been along our list of the last couple of years. And she also demands that the public facilities in that location are up to her standards. So we both have our standards of what we want for field day. And that's going to be a problem this year if we would travel somewhere. Now, mistakenly, many hams think the Class B means that they're operating with a battery. Now, B and battery sort of go together, but Class B can actually be any type of power. It can be emergency power with a generator, it could be a battery, or it could even be commercial power. So Class B is not limited to just battery operation. In fact, in the reporting that takes place in the magazine in QST, with the results, there's actually 12 possible permutations of a Class B station. Now remember, the exchange still remains 1B. If there's 1 signal simultaneously on there, excuse me 1 second, we have to corral the dog in here that's barking at our neighbors. Would you please close? So sorry about that interruption there. My wife, K8ODP, is closing the door to get rid of the dog sound. So again, it's 1B if you have 1 signal on the air at a time. If you have 2 signals on the air at the time, you become a 2B. It doesn't matter how many people are involved, but when the results are listed in the magazine, it does. So the last couple of years, I've actually been operating 2B, 1B, 2 radios on the air at one time with 1 operator, and I've been using battery power. But my exchange is still 2B. It's not 2B, 1B when I give my exchange. Class C operation is a mobile station in which the vehicle is capable of operating while in motion. In other words, you don't change anything. You don't put antennas down. You don't track things. So a Class B station, I'm sorry, a Class C station is required to be able to operate in motion. So the vehicle does not need to be moving when you're making contacts, but it does need to be capable of doing it without changes in the antennas or station. So Class C is not as impacted by social distancing as other classes, but supportive services, restrooms, food, etc. may be limited. without well-designated and installed antennas. And if you'll excuse me for 1 second, I need to refresh the screen here. There we go. I had the wrong picture in there. So I know that now I have the most up-to-date slides. Very good. As I said, I keep updating it all the time, so it's constantly changing. One of the problems with the Class C operation is without a well-designed and installed antennas and mobile mobile contacts can be very difficult. Your typical 100-watt signal is not nearly as effective as one with a stationary antenna or even a simple dipole. So if you do plan on operating mobile, make sure that you have a good installation. Even with a good installation, expect a decrease in the potential for operation. So with that in mind, I put together a number of links for designing Class C operations, in other words, mobile installations, and I have about a half dozen here. This K0BG is often considered the Bible for mobile operators. His website has extensive resources on mobile installations. And even if you're not planning doing this for field day, this is a great slide for reference if you want to set up a mobile HF station. Now, one of the questions I keep getting from people is, okay, we're going to be Class C, and we're going to take all of our vehicles with their antennas on them. We're going to pull them into a 1,000-foot circle and become 5C instead of 1C. The problem is that's not the way the rules are written. When you have a vehicle, it has to be one vehicle because all 5 vehicles can't move together without any changes, and they're not one unit. So if you see a 2B station, that would be, I'm sorry, a 2C station, that would be 2 radios installed in the same vehicle, whether it's a boat, a car, an RV, or whatever it might be. So you can't have a 5C station by pulling all your vehicles into a circle. Now, even if you could, it's not a really good wise idea, because instead, why not become a Class A or Class B station by pulling all your vehicles into the 1,000-foot circle and then using antennas that are not attached for use during mobile operation? Your signals will improve greatly, and you don't really gain anything by being a Class C station over a Class A or Class B station. I guess the novelty might be the only thing that you would gain. So there's nothing wrong with using your vehicle as your power source and your location to operate within, but you might as well put up regular antennas, even if they're very simple. Just throwing a line into a tree is much better than most mobile antennas. This is an example of what you might think would be a Class C station. The antenna is right here in the back, but the problem is this station can't operate until the antenna is raised, and you can't drive with the antenna up in the air. So this, in fact, would be a Class B station with 1 or 2 operators, unless you pack the van full of maybe a dozen people, and then it might be a Class A station instead of a Class B station. So not Class C, but Class A or B with vehicles is a very feasible and a very good idea for social distancing. All your equipment's right there, already ready to go in the van or the car, or whatever it is. You drive to the location, you throw up a temporary antenna, and you operate as Class A or Class B, depending on how many people are involved in the operation in your 1,000-foot circle. Now, let's move on to Class D operation. Class D is a home station using commercial power. So you can use all your normal antennas, feed lines, radios, etc., and you use commercial AC power. So nothing special has to be done to operate Class D. Now, in the past, there has been one additional requirement placed on Class D stations by the ARRL. And that is Class D stations could not contact other Class D stations for points. They could make a contact, but it wouldn't count for points in the activity. This year, based on feedback from members, last week, the ARRL said that they were going to temporarily remove this restriction for 2020 only, so that Class D stations can contact other Class D stations and receive points. That's one of the 2 waivers they put in place. I'll talk about the other one as we get down a little bit further. So now a Class D station can operate and make contacts with everyone else. So there's not that limitation on it. Now, Class E is a home station using all the antennas, towers, radios, etc., but having emergency power. And this has been a class of operation for a number of years now, and it's a very popular class. And I know a lot of people, in lieu of doing a Class A operation this year, many of the members of their clubs will be doing Class E operations from their homes. Now, even if you're set up and planning on doing a Class D, even though they've made that waiver for getting points, if you can operate a Class B, it's a much better chance to stick to some of the demonstration of the emergency communications aspect of field day, as opposed to just worrying about the contesting aspects of field day. In addition, Class E stations are only required to have emergency power for the transceivers, and they're not necessary for computers unless the computers are being used to generate signals. So if you're doing FT8, RIDI, if you're sending CW with your computer or decoding CW with the computer, it needs to be on emergency power. If you're not, you can still be a Class E station if you're not using your computer to actually create your signal. As I said earlier, Class E, if you have emergency power and want to operate from home, is a good option for the for this year's field day. Class F, I'm just going to mention, it's a emergency operations center class, and we're not going to say anything else about it because it doesn't apply to most of us. And it's nothing different this year than it would normally be during social distancing. So one of the things that a lot of people were expecting might happen back in early April, and I even sent a request to some people in AWR to consider this, would be to have distributed joint station operation. This would be where there is a number of Class D or Class E stations all using the same call sign, but being on different bands at different times at the same time, so that they would not be operating in conflict with each other. This has not been approved for this year. It's not one of the rules, so there is no distributed joint station operation. Also, as has always been the rule, you cannot run multiple separate stations under one call sign because they would not fall inside that 1,000-foot circle. So everyone can't use the club call at their house and operate for field day. So you can't all just use one call sign and operate. But what the AWRL did say is, for 2020 only, we are going to use aggregated club scores. We're going to collect aggregated club scores and publish those, just as they do for the 9 contests throughout the year that have affiliated club competitions built into them. So traditionally, those contests are ones that already do this sort of thing, with people signing up for a specific contesting group and being in there. They're going to do that same sort of thing. They're going to publish those results for 2020. And I'll talk more about that later when we're talking about entering. So I just put together some examples here of what a station's classification would be. So a mobile station operating in Wyoming would be 1C Wyoming. A solo operating station in Pittsburgh with commercial power would be a 1D WPA. And a 2 transmitter home operation using a generator in Brooklyn, New York would be 2E New York, Long Island. So one of the things that's very important for field day, and as a matter of fact, the AWRL gives bonus points for having a safety officer present at the site and following a specific checklist of safety criteria, and that is being safe. With our operation of many home stations or individual stations this year, it's still important to be safe. But the problem is, it's sometimes harder to be safe when there's no one looking over your shoulder saying, "Don't." There's a electric wire above your head. Don't swing that vertical into it. So I want everyone to still use the AWRL safety checklist, and I have a link to it right here that brings it up. And this has some safety information for you on field day. I'm suggesting to my club members, and I would strongly suggest this to other people, be careful about climbing. There's going to be a real incentive for many people to try and get an antenna up high somewhere without anyone else helping them. And that can mean a set of disastrous falls. So be careful about climbing. Don't rush, don't cut corners. Be aware of overhead wires. When using generators, there's a couple things you need to be aware of. 3 main things. Gasoline, especially when you're refueling, is very flammable. carbon monoxide fumes in enclosed spaces. Even putting that generator inside the garage with the garage door open can cause accumulation of carbon dioxide. And it can be a very bad situation. And I don't have it on this slide, but I have it on another one. Also, you need to properly ground your generator when you're operating it for electrical safety. Now, with emergency power options that are available, there's really 4 types of power operations available for field day emergency power. Generators, either it's a standalone generator or you can use a vehicle-based generator. In other words, the alternator and battery system in your mobile vehicle. So when you use that mobile vehicle as a Class C or Class B, that's your emergency power, and you can use that. You can't charge batteries with it though for the solar power, because of course you're using a motor-driven generator to do it. Solar power is another way to power your station, and with solar power you're allowed to use storage batteries that are charged by the solar system. Batteries in general are allowed to be used, and there's some bonus points available, and I'm not going to worry too much about bonus points in tonight's talk. You can look through all the bonus point things later on. And then of course other alternative power, hand cranked water wheels, bicycle generators, etc. So I put together a 1-page of links on generator use, safety, and selection. And these are all out there. And again, you can click on these and view these for more detailed information if you plan on using a generator. For battery power, I did the same thing. I put together a collection of about a little over 6 links for information on different types of battery power that you might want to use during field day. Solar power, I'm still working on that slide. In addition, if you're going to power your computer from power, there's a couple things that's important. One, if you're using an inverter, you want to make sure it's an inverter that has at least a pretty close to sine wave, if not perfect sine wave, so that you'll get a good AC signal that would run your computer charger. But what I do is I actually use a device like this one right here. This is a battery that puts out 20 volts DC and allows me to plug it directly into the charging port of my computer, and I can operate all weekend with my computer using this type of battery charger, because I'm not wasting energy by going from battery to inverter to power supply and then back to DC again. And something like this you can pick up for about $100. I also have one of my computers is actually a tablet with a attached keyboard, and it operates off 5 volts. So the number of portable battery power packs for phones is just enormous. So if you thinking about a low power operation for your computer needs for the field day, think about tablets or computers that can be charged from 5 volts, because there's so many cheap battery sources out there for those. In addition to power, you need an antenna. And I put together a whole slide, and these are both links to take you out to a full multiple page document on choosing antennas, pros and cons of wire antennas, verticals, beams, different types of wire antennas. And then after that, there's a whole section for each of the type of antennas, for links for building or working with any of these type of antennas. So if you haven't built a dipole before, if you have a member of your group that wants to build a dipole, this is the kind of thing you can give them. And this document is available at tiny.cc/portant. So portant is the abbreviation for that, and it gets you to this. And again, either of these 2 pictures in the slideshow will bring you to this. After I did this last week, I did this presentation for a local club, and they said, what about VHF antennas? So I went back and put a whole section in about VHF antennas for those technicians who might only have an FM-HT. By just adding a simple tiger tail or a ground plane antenna to it can greatly increase its ability to communicate during field day. Again, I'm hoping that field day is going to be a learning opportunity for many people to learn how to do things that they might have not done on their own before. A Class B operation is what I've done for years, and it's very easy to do with only 1 or 2 people, and it's very easy to transport it. I've used Go boxes in the past. For a Class B station, it needs to be a temporary installation of a station at a distance from your home station. And actually the ARRL has something called the Field Day FAQ. And in that FAQ, it talks about what constitutes a sufficient distance from your home. And we'll talk more in detail about that in a few slides. So I have a whole page here on Go boxes. on my website. And then I also have some presentations on Go boxes. And I also have a variety of other people's resources on portable operations in the field. So again, this is at kzt.com, and it's a whole section on Go boxes. I also have this presentation on Go boxes here. And then of course, this is the portable antenna link. So this is an example of a Class B station using a vehicle for power and a portable mast with 2 small beams on it. A very effective operation. This is particular one was operating the ARRL VHF UHF contest, but this is also something that would be very suitable for a field day Class B operation. So temporary installation at your home. The ARRL in the fact says something along the lines that, yeah, if you have a giant yard and you don't go anywhere near your house and da 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 da. So I'll read that to you, the details in a few moments, but you can't use any existing radio infrastructure, antennas, supports, coax runs, etc. You need to use emergency power, whether it's a generator, battery, or solar power. It's best if you have a bigger property or friendly neighbors. And this is the actual answer for the FAQ. And they say that if it's too close to the house and you're just operating in your backyard, it's not really in the spirit of Class B. Well, what I feel, and this is my suggestion and my own opinion, if you pack everything you need for your operation up, just like you were going to drive 100 or 300 miles away, put it all in the back of your car, and you never get anything else out during field day, I'm not worried so much about the distance from your house. I'm using the ARC. I call this the ARC method. Everything I've loaded in the ARC is the only things I'm going to use during field day. If I didn't load it in the ARC, I'm not going back to the house to get it. I'm not going back in the house to solder a loose connection. I'm not doing any of that. So I am effectively disconnecting myself completely from that. So whether I was loading up my car to drive to Maine, which I've done in the past, or whether I was packing everything up, getting on the train and going to Montana to operate, in all cases, I've had everything packed up and ready to go, and I was not able to go back to the house to get anything. So that's my strongest feeling on Class B is you need to make it totally independent of whatever housing structure you have and what other equipment you might have stockpiled. Now, that doesn't mean you can't pack your car to the gills with anything you might possibly need. That's well within the means of Class B operation, no matter where your car is going to be parked, no matter where you're going to operate. And I can address that in questions if you have more questions about that later. I just have a couple quick slides showing you the Class B can be a lot of fun and great opportunities. My wife and I took Amtrak out to Glacier National Park, and we spent a couple of days in East Glacier. This was the picnic table I operated on. This is the cabin I was staying in. This is the view over top of the cabin of Glacier National Park. By the way, if you do plan on operating in Montana, they have the worst mosquitoes in the world. I understand Alaska might be worse, but Montana's bad. I covered myself in insect repellent, so they instead bit me on the eyelids, in my ears, and under my fingernails. And under my watch also, as my wife just yelled across the room. So I had a giant pile of dead mosquitoes sitting in front of me where I was operating. In 2000, what year was this? 2010, I was the first station in the United States to have sunlight hit me during field day because I was on top of Cadillac Mountain in Acadia National Park in Maine. It's not the most eastern point for field day, but it's the first point that gets sunlight because of the combination of height and eastern location. Matter of fact, it got so sunny that I couldn't see my computer screen, so I ended up throwing a blanket over my head and the computer so I could operate. Oh, I forgot to bring a sign with me, so I took the cardboard box to my solar panel and put a note on there because I was right along the path where everyone was walking in Acadia National Park. This wasn't my most productive field day as far as on-air contacts, but it was definitely my most productive field day for Class B operation eyeball contacts. And on Sunday morning, I had to resort to CW only with my headphones because I couldn't use phone because there was 2 weddings taking place about 100 feet away from me, and I didn't want to have them hear me yelling KZT in the background. We've been to Cass, West Virginia, which is also down near the National Radio Observatory. We were just outside the radio silent zone, and we were staying at Seneca Forest. This was an interesting place. This cabin did not have any electricity. It had a wood stove and a gas-powered refrigerator. These are some of my other Class B operations. Here's a yurt in West Virginia. Here's a porch in Hocking Hills, Ohio. And this I put a picture in here because this is my Volkswagen van again. And for many years, our club used this in their Class A operation. I would drive down and this would be one of our station locations. Eventually, I blew the engine in this car and it sat in my driveway for 3 years. But each year we towed it down to the field day site and operated from it because it was just such a convenient operating location. Here's my Go box with my KX3 in it, and I'm operating at one of my Class B operations. This is my latest one. This was last year in Vermont, and I was running 2B because I was running phone and CW on this station on the one side, and over here I was operating simultaneously FT8 and no FT4 that time because it wasn't around yet, but FT8. So I was operating 2 stations at one time. I can only do that through the miracle of digital operations. I can't do 2 CW stations at the same time. So that's Class B. What happens if you don't have a station and none of these apply? Well, the other option is a existing Class E or Class D station that people allow you to operate remotely from. So you might do a remote operation over the internet in this way. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but that is one possibility if you have no other possibilities. Now, one of the problems occurs, and I think one of our hosts this evening was talking about his small property in Toronto, downtown Toronto. If you have a housing, a homeowners association restrictions, or you have no yard, or you're on the 13th story of a building, and you have no place to put up antennas, you can do things such as indoor antennas, balcony antennas, window antennas, flagpole antennas. These are some ways you can get around these housing restrictions and antenna restrictions. You can also do satellite contacts because you're just pointing an antenna. It doesn't matter exactly where your antenna is at. And because you're going to be using a compromised antenna in most of these cases, I do suggest if you're going to use an interior antenna, make sure you also have FT8, FT4 capability, because it can get out when a lot of the other types of signals cannot. As you see here, the amount of signal required for an FT8 or FT4 contact is much, much less than that of a single sideband station. And I put together a whole presentation right here, this link, tiny.cc, FT8, FT4. This was from a club presentation I did back in March or February, and it's a whole thing on FT8 and FT4. And it's, again, another 100-slide presentation, I think. Now, one of the types of antennas that you can use if you have antenna restrictions in your area, you need something very portable, is a magnetic loop antenna. These don't have to be up high in the air. They can work very easily. One of the problems with these, if you ever used one, whenever you change frequency a little bit, you got to retune the antenna. And that can be a real pain because of the narrow bandwidth. You're constantly playing around with retuning the antenna. Well, the nice thing about FT8 and FT4 is once you change band, you plop down on one frequency and you never move. So the combination of FT8, FT4, and a magnetic loop antenna can be your savior in a situation where you have severe antenna restrictions. So you might want to consider that as one of your possibilities. So our next section is going to talk specifically about technician class licensees in the United States. One of the problems is traditionally a lot of these people, members of the radio club who had technician class licenses, would operate under the control operator aspect of a higher class TAM at a field day club situation. And so they were able to operate on all the HF bands under this control operator. The problem comes when they're operating from home, they can't do that. So we have to figure out how we can accommodate these people. And there's a number of them out there, not only technician class licensees, but also some people who are legacy novice class people who have not upgraded from novice class. So they might still have a novice class license. There are basically 4 operations available for this group. They are VHF 2 meter, VHF 6 meter and 2 meter, satellite contacts on the low Earth orbit FM satellites, especially 10 meter single sideband, and digital is their only operation options on HF for voice. But there's also still the original novice bands that have CW only allocations on 80, 40, 15, and 10. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these 4 ways to get technician class licensees on the air. So let's talk about VHF 6 meters first. Unless there's either E-skip or F-layer activation, your number of potential contacts with 6 meters is limited to those people in your immediate area, maybe a couple county area, maybe 100 miles or so, you're going to be limited. Fortunately, if eSkip opens up, you might be able to work half the country. And if it's really a good day, you might be able to work the whole country. So there is the potential. We don't know for sure. 6 meters may open up or 6 meters may be dead. The one thing that's important is either way, if we have enough people operating, even locally, there'll still be the potential for making 6 meter contacts, even if we don't get a good opening. Now, last weekend was a wonderful day for a technician class field day operation. Saturday, especially, 10 meters and 6 meters were both open with eSkip for most of the day. And I made contacts all over the East Coast and down into Florida and Texas on both 6 and 10. It would have been a great day. And in Ohio, the weather was perfect for field day also, 65 degrees and sunny, which we haven't had a lot of. We don't know if we're going to get that 28 days from now, but it'd be nice if we do. If we don't get that, or even in addition with that, the addition again of FT8 and FT4 to this technician class 6 meter station would increase their chances of multiple contacts, because now they can make not only a phone contact to the close in station, but they can also make an FT8 or FT4. So the potential for 2 contacts for every one station that might be out there if they're working multiple modes. As far as VHF 2 meters goes, it's typically not a band that's used much at field day. There's no reason it could not be. And there is some single sideband activity sometimes similar to the ARRL VHF, UHF contest, but nowhere near as much. Also, what may happen is the person may not have single sideband 2 meter equipment and they'd be limited to FM equipment. So the thing that'd be very important this year is that if we do encourage all classes of operators to have a 2 meter HT next to them or listen on their 2 meter radio and occasionally call CQ. So even if they're operating as an extra class licensee that's only operating CW down in the 40 meters the whole time, listen every once in a while, give a couple calls and try and make a few FM simplex 2 meter contacts for people who might be limited by their equipment and their license class. And again, it's very important that we encourage people to do this. If we don't encourage people, it's not the typical mode of operation for field day. I'm not going to talk too much about satellite operations, because if the person has not gotten geared up on satellites before, it's going to be a little bit of a steep learning curve for somewhat steep learning curve, but it's not really that hard. So it is possible. One of the biggest problems with operating strictly a satellite station operation for field day is there's very limited number of time slots available when the satellites are passing over. And with these low Earth orbit satellites, an 8 to 12 minute pass is typical. And they're going to be really under a lot of stress with multiple people trying to get the bonus points for working a satellite contest. So I'm not sure if satellites are where I'd want to spend all my time or energy if I was a technician class, unless you enjoyed operating satellites already. But just in case, I have a whole presentation on using FM low orbiting satellites. And again, if you don't do it for field day, think about doing it as another activity to learn about something new. And I put this whole thing together. And then also last week, there was an excellent presentation on the IARU workshop, and that's been recorded. So you can go back and look at that for information on operating satellites. The other option for technician class operators is to operate 10 meter single sideband and or digital operation on 10 meters. And this is the only HF band on which not technician class licensees will be able to do this. Again, we're at the bottom of the sunspot cycle, so 10 meters isn't always the best band to make contacts on when the sunspot cycle is so low. And I would suggest if we were in a normal field day with a bunch of Class A stations, most of them would never go look on 10 meters during the weekend. But I'm suggesting you do that. Take some breaks in your day, take a trip to 10 meters, especially in the early afternoon, and make sure that you can make some contacts for people and stay in the technician part of the voice portion of 10 meters. I don't think it's going to get too crowded there. 28.3 to 28.5, call CQ so that they're not the only ones calling CQ, and make some contacts there. I have a link here to a whole reference list on 10 meter frequencies and 10 meter operations. And again, you got to call CQ or no one's going to answer. In addition to single sideband, technician class operators can also operate FT8, FT4, PSK, or RTTY on 10 meters in the 28.0 to 28.3 portion of the band. As I said earlier, there are CW bands available that everyone has privileges on, and they are on 80, 40, 15, and 10. And national contacts are easily available. You don't have to worry about this, about the propagation that day. I'm pretty sure 40 meters will be open unless we get a big solar flare or something of that nature that kills everyone's opportunities. So if you're willing to spend some time and give a try at CW, this can be a very rewarding experience. Now, I know that most of these people out there with technician class licenses have limited or no CW experience at all. So I have a link here to a presentation I did called Having Fun with Morse. We'll silence that. And this is something I put together that I use when we're teaching our general class licensees. Just an introduction to what Morse code is and what's available. But I talk a lot in here about using Morse code with limited code copying ability. You're not being tested on your code copying ability, you're being tested on your ability to make contact. So however you need to do to make the contact, I encourage novice and technician class operators to utilize some of the things that other people might not be that quick to use, such as decoders, both computer-based and software-based. I'm sorry, both computer-based and radio-based. So these are the bands available for CW operation. You do need to be aware if you are going to operate CW that there's going to be some really loud patches of signals for FT8 and FT4. So you're not going to want to sit there and get clobbered by them. And so you can use software to decode CW, hardware to decode CW, or some radios actually have built-in CW decoders. And I have a few slides in a row here about that. As far as sending, that's not a problem. If using a contest software like N1MM or WriteLog or N3JFP, all those have the ability to send CW from the keyboard right there. So the sending of CW is not a problem for most of these people. The biggest problem is not only being able to decode the CW, but knowing how to operate CW. So that's why I put together this whole presentation that talks about things like operating technique, abbreviations, shortcuts, cut numbers, other things that they might hear that they might not recognize. So when you hear 599, and you actually hear 5NN, know what it means, or when someone sends back NR question mark to you, you need to know that they're asking for your exchange again. So I put together this whole presentation. Here's some links on, these are all in that Fun with Morse presentation. I just pulled some slides out. Here's some slides on making CW contacts. Here's some software to decode CW with. There's two programs that are supported directly by N1MM. They interface with it, FLDigity, which is free, and CWGit, which is a paid program. I have a whole section with using FLDigity in a CW contest, both YouTubes and documents for the people to read. If you do use FLDigity in a CW for CW, I strongly recommend you don't use the default setting of feeding the CW tones in as audio tones through the microphone of your radio. This really defeats the ability to be able to do decoding because you can't use your radio in the CW mode and take advantage of the filters. So if you are thinking about using FLDigi, spend the time and read these two reference pieces on feeding your CW by keying your radio through a hardware keying interface. You'll have much better results. There's also some decoders out there that are hardware based. And then, as I said, many radios, the Kenwood TS 590 SG, the Elecraft K3, K3S, KX3, and KX2 all can decode CW. The Zygo G90 can decode CW. And for $49, you can buy a little kit, or $89 assembled, single band radios. They are QRP, about 5 watts, the QCX radios, and they have a built-in decoder. They even have a built-in Morse code key on them down at the bottom here, right here, that you could actually send Morse code with. These are some apps you can put on your phone. These are for Androids. I don't have a collection of, I don't have an iPhone, so I don't have an iPhone collection of these, but it's pretty similar. So that's a little bit about what technician class and novice class operators can do to still get on by themselves during field day. What I want to do now is I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about what clubs need to do to get members to solo. This is the encouragement, the teaching, the training, the hand-holding that's going to be necessary to get them to operate on their own during field day without the support of a whole group. So I strongly suggest doing group presentations similar to what we're doing tonight with this. So you could easily do one on building a dipole, or how does field day operation work, how do you do exchanges, etc. There's also a bunch of how-to videos that they can make links to. and collection of resources checklists. So these are all things training wise that clubs can do to help their members train. There's training and information resources. The ARU Field Day webpage is a good spot. I also have a whole page on contesting on my website with a variety of contesting resources if they've not learned the contesting aspect of things. And as I said before, slide presentations on an FT8. I also have something I call the Quick Start FT8 Operations Guide that you have next to you on the table when you're operating. This is not for setting up your radio on FT8. This is how you're going to interpret the signals you're seeing on the screen. So even if you're not real comfortable doing this, you haven't done it a lot, this is a good refresher to have with you as a little cheat sheet while you're operating. How to change modes, how to change frequencies. And again, this is all available. These documents are all available easily from the links within my main slideshow presentation. And again, I strongly suggest if you're going to take up FT8 or FT4 as a mode that you want to operate, start now. Don't wait until field day to start. You'll not only have a frustrating time yourself, but you might also frustrate a lot of other people by your poor activity. So this is the time to practice. I even have a slide included here with all this activity we're talking about with the interfacing radios for CW or for logging or for whatever FT8. A lot of times we run the port problems, and N6 TV Bob did a wonderful presentation on USB and serial ports for the Contest University. And I have a link here for his slideshow. And I also have a link here where you can actually watch the YouTube recording of his presentation. That's not him, by the way, that's K3LR Tim, who was the moderator. I also put together another document you can share with your club members. It's a simplified version of the field day rules and the ARRL facts. So instead of being 8 pages long, it's like 3 pages long, and it talks more about the simple things that a beginner would need to know and be able to reference real quick. So I put this together, and that again is available on from the link within this document. I guess it grew past 5 pages. I have also put together, I just did this 2 days ago, I put together a document that is a sample document for clubs to send out to their members as an email attachment or as a something in their newsletter or to post on their website. And it's basically what you need to do to operate field day. And it's pretty much a condensation of today's presentation, but in a text format that's only about 5 or 6 pages long as opposed to 130 slides long. And this is designed so that you can go through and change all the yellow areas to your club's name, your club's section, all that information so that this can be customized to use for to send out and to share with all your club members. There's a whole section here on what they need to do. 5 simple steps to operating field day. You need to choose your class of operation. I go on to explain how that works. Know your field day exchange, prepare your station ahead of time, operating the bands and modes available for your license class, and then how to submit your entry. So this is just the basic 5. If you can do these 5 things, you can get on and operate field day. And it goes through and gives a little more detail on each of these. And as I said, this document is available from within here. It's also available by going to this shortcut, tiny.cc/SFDA, Sierra Foxtrot Delta Alpha. Sample field day attachment is what the name stands for. And that'll probably keep growing just a little bit. I have another club member that's working with me on this, and we've been tweaking this over the last 2 days. So I just started this yesterday, and it's been tweaked a lot since then. The club members also need to encourage all the members of the club to operate in the portions of the band and the modes that the technicians have access to. It doesn't do any good just to have the technicians trying to operate there. You need to have all your club members think about spending at least a little bit of time on these different areas. Another thing clubs can do is they can set up incentives to encourage people to get on the air during field day. Our club is doing an incentive. We're giving away a $50 gift certificate for everyone who enters field day, sends in the log to ARRL, and sends it into our club. We're going to have a random drawing, and someone's going to get a $50 gift certificate for a local ham radio emporium. We're also going to provide suitable for framing certificates customized for different accomplishments of different people, like most contacts in field day, most contacts above 6 meters, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll be doing these type of things as incentives. We're also giving out field day pins from the ARRL to all the club members that participate. We're paying for those. specific needs of your club members, things like providing them with software to use, helping them with it. And we've actually set it up so that we're going to be making remote connections to people to provide them software support to help them get set up before field day. I'm going to skip over a couple things. This talks just about field day logging software, a bunch of help files on using N1MM and N3FJP, which are the most two common programs used by our club members, and they're very common for field day. Also talk briefly about bonus points, but I refer them to the ARRL documentation for that. I also strongly suggesting that people consider a couple warm-up events. I just took the CW WPX off here because it was a great opportunity to try out your CW stuff, but it's not available any longer. So there's going to be the COVID-19 radio communication event on June 6th and 7th. It's going to be CW single sideband and digital. The ARRL VHF contest in June is a wonderful opportunity to not only test your equipment, your operating skills, but also to pack everything up just like you're going to be a Class B station and head out in the field and see what you forgot to bring with you so you'll remember it for field day. It's also a great opportunity to try an FT8 and FT4 on 6 meters and 2 meters. So it's a good opportunity for technicians to get a dry run at field day. The phone fray occurs each week. It's a quick 1-hour sprint. The problem is it's not in a portion of the band that the technicians can use, but it's a good warm up for anyone who's not used to contesting on phone. And then the CW ops have a mini CW test multiple times during the day. They're on Wednesdays. They have morning sessions and afternoon sessions both. So again, it's a good chance to warm up. You can also have your club do a 10-meter simplex net so people get used to testing out their equipment, and a 2-meter FM simplex contest or net. Do a sample parks on the air if you don't get a chance to go out for the VHF UHF contest. Make sure you go to the field day locator and list your station even if you're operating from home. I've been guaranteed by my ARRL section manager, Scott Yonley. He will be visiting all the people that post to this locator in the state of Ohio. He will be doing it virtually though, of course, this year. He won't be driving to each of them. So please make sure you go through and do this. And I need to fix my screen here so we get rid of that flashing, because my screensaver is kicking in nighttime vision. So let's take care of that. Okay. Another nice thing that might be to do is consider using either the two or both of the contest online scoreboards so different club members can see the activity of other members during the contest. You might also consider streaming some of your contact things. As long as you don't do it to increase competitive advantage, it'd be a very nice thing to do. But what you shouldn't do is show your frequencies so that try and solicitate QSOs that way is somewhat contest unethical. And we're also asking all of our hams to take short videos or pictures so that we can put together a montage for a whole club so they can see how other people operated during field day. I want to end with a couple things here, some takeaways. I think as we've witnessed the whole process of field day, there's been a lot of angst and hand-wringing by amateur radio operators who don't think they're going to be able to have an enjoyable field day this year. And I think a lot of it goes back to the fact that they're too worried about one of two things. They're either too worried about the contesting aspect or the emergency communications aspect of this. So what I'm really suggesting as a takeaway is thinking about the fact, if the competitive aspect of field day is really important to you, think about operating other contests during the year as a club or as an individual. Don't just operate once a year. Don't limit your contest operating each year to field day. And I know a lot of people that do that. So please take the opportunity to take part in other activities. And if you like the field day type of operation, it'd be a great activity to take your club out and do ARRL VHF contest as a field day operation. It lends itself very well to that. If the emergency preparation aspect is the part that's your club's main driving force, consider being involved in other forms of emergency communication besides field day. There's other ways to test your club's ability to be ready by being involved in your ARRL section's MCOM set test in October, other activities that take place at the section level, also be part of your local areas group, and consider taking an MCOM training course through the ARRL. These are all things you can do. Don't let field day be your only emergency communications that your club does each year. If the community outreach and educational aspect of field day is the part that you're really interested in, consider getting involved in a wide variety of other activities in your community, public service type of events, maybe being a station for a centennial, or being providing communications for a fun run, or other things such as this at a community fair. Get involved with youth and amateur radio. Get involved in teaching licensing classes and giving VE exams. Set up and maintain an active public relations program with your club, including press, media, and social media. We use field day as the only time of year we ever try and communicate with local press, and we don't understand why they're not willing to cover all of our field day information. Well, part of the problem is because we limit it to once a year, they don't know us. So you want to establish a presence by providing press media with updates throughout the year of activities your club and your club members are doing. And again, if all three of these aspects are really important to you, your club can definitely be involved in all three. And getting more clubs involved in your amateur radio activities is always a good thing. And learning and participating in new amateur radio activities is always a great thing. So if you have additional ideas, please feel free to send them to me. Please review the slideshow a couple weeks from now once I've made all the updates from people's suggestions. And we're ready for questions.
Well, thank you very much, Anthony. That was really quite incredible. I know my own personal experience in field day is with my local club, and there's one or two of the club members actually here, and we run 12A and have a great deal of fun. And it's a great opportunity because what we do is we tend to pair some of the more new, not as experienced operators with some of the experienced operators, and get them more heavily involved with the practical hands-on of all the joys of pitching tents and making sure the food gets cooked, and the 3 a.m, there goes the skunk and what happened to our antenna, so on. So anyhow, with that, Augusto, let me turn it over to you. Anthony, again, thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. Augusto, what do we have in terms of questions out there?
Okay, you can hear me now, right?
Yes, and I'll
Yes.
stop sharing here also.
Okay, perfect. Well, everybody can unmute themselves now. So if anybody wants to ask a question, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead, please.
You willing to take a comment?
Yes, please.
Okay, I think it's an excellent presentation on how to do the operating aspects of field day when we're all dealing with the physical distancing now. And we've been thinking about that a lot. That if anything, what you're talking about, the easier part, I think, of what field day often means for clubs. Because those of us who like to do the contesting are the first ones to run and jump into the chair and want to operate are obviously thinking about those kinds of things. The big challenge for the club, though, is that there are a whole lot of other things about field day that it's probably harder to think of what we do in these circumstances. I would think we should still try to do some of the field day. I guess what's missing out of this is field day as a demonstration activity as opposed to a contest or a competitive activity.
Yes.
And the demonstration activity, and I haven't answers. In fact, what I've been thinking of is raising the question and asking clubs to think about it and let me know. So what have they done about that? You're not bringing people who aren't hams in to see what amateur radio looks like a lot of clubs try to do. There's no way to do a get on the air station. And in fact, even in the regular field days, it's often new hams who haven't tried all of the equipment that people have get to try it there too. So none of which, well, some of this stuff you get points for, but you're not doing it just for the points. You're doing it for the activity, bringing someone who's a served agency out, trying to get a local politician to see what you're doing. So for clubs, and I think that it would help if you added some of that stuff to the presentation. for clubs to make some contact with a local politician or have them talk to people or send a message, some things like that to deal with the showing what amateur radio can do, that it's fun, that you can set up and operate without power, those kinds of things. So anyway, that's just my thoughts from what you've done. But what's wonderful what you've done in the full range of how to deal with operating.
And I think that's a great suggestion. I will definitely add that to that. And I forgot to show this. This is something that I created in the past. This is a field day handout that I've been suggesting field days use. And one of the problems is a lot of clubs would have trouble putting together materials for field day to present at a public relations table or an education table. So I've created this. It's a 2-page document. And I suggest people print it out on 11 by 17 paper. And I've set this up so that they can QR code scan them, so they don't need to make multiples of these. They'd make one or two big sets of copies, laminate them, and then have them available at field day site. And I'm suggesting that people also use this year with the limited access by either providing these by email to other people, or by, if they are going to be at a local, if they're going to be doing a Class B operation in a local park, have these remote from their operation with a table saying, here's information what I'm doing. I'm sorry you can't come over and see me directly, but here's some information. So I have a little short presentation on what is amateur radio. And then most of this is actually designed for teachers, students, and youth. And there's activities on here that we would normally do with the youth at the field day site, like building a clothespin key, doing direction finding. We'd have some Chromebooks or other devices where they could tune a radio themselves by using a SDR. So this whole thing is available, and the link to this is tiny.cc/HRY, ham radio youth. And I will make sure that gets into the slide presentation also. I thought it was in there, but I might have skipped over that slide when I was going through. I didn't really take a breath during all 130 slides. But yeah, this is one of the resources that I've been providing, and I sent this out. And please, please, please feel free to share this with all the clubs in your area. This is something that the people that have used it found it very popular. So that's one of the things. But yes, please, I love your suggestions, and I will add more about the aspect of the public relations aspect of things. And I think the other big thing too, and this is something we're trying to work on as part of the Ohio Section Project. We're trying to figure out how to do a little bit more formal method of mentoring, so that when people come in and looking for an Elmer or a mentor, it usually happens by accident. They'll get associated with someone, but we want to set up some things, basically say, yeah, here's your club. And in our club, these are people that are always available to do mentoring for anyone. And it will even identify in some respects, like, this is the person, if you have antenna problems, these are the people you might want to talk to in the club. So we're trying to get away from that one day a year of people learning at field day to having them learning throughout the year. But I think, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to duplicate the social and camaraderie aspects of field day, or the fun of having groundhogs in the middle of the night. Or we set up on a place called Groundhog Hill, because there's groundhog holes that you got to be careful you don't fall in. And it's nothing like stepping out of your tent in the middle of the night and tripping over a groundhog instead of falling in the groundhog hole, which we've marked ahead of time. Other questions? I'll stop the screen share so we can see here.
I have a question.
Yes.
My son, I belong to a club. My son does not, and he hasn't really gotten on the air. But this year, since we're operating from home, he's going to operate with me.
Very
so
good.
How, since he's not part of the club and I'm part of the club, how are we going to do the points?
There's no problem, because the club association, he can submit to any club he wants to. So as far as that accumulated club score, my understanding is, even if you want to create a new club today, that's fine to do that. So you don't have to be a member of the club to participate in giving points to that club.
Okay.
And hopefully if your station can support multiple stations simultaneously transmitting, you can be a 2 or 3 or whatever operation with the 2 of you. That's great. You already have a building crew.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Next, please. Yes, Dean, go ahead.
Yeah, Anthony, I want to thank you. Excellent presentation. I want to mention I tried downloading the presentation on that website or that link that you gave. I can view it, but it doesn't give me the option to be able to download it. And I've tried it with a couple of different browsers.
Yeah, I don't have this presentation in a PDF format or anything because it's been so much of a constant editing. I don't want people to have a static copy right now. But if you do need a static copy for any way, just drop me an email and I'll generate a PDF for you. I just did one yesterday for a person who's sight impaired because they need to use their reader with it and their reader wasn't working with the online web display.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, I have a comment
Yes.
from YouTube. Jim Williams, KV4FLC, says that clubs and operators can virtually contact local media and others to promote amateur radio during the pandemic. He says use the same type of setup used by ARIS with local schools and others via Zoom or YouTube.
I think that's a very good idea. And the other thing too is a lot of news organizations are even more eager this year to hear our news about amateur radio because they see it as a way of us connecting with people even during social isolation. I've seen numerous articles. There's a big article in the Columbus Dispatch a couple days ago about amateur radio operators still being around and still being very active during this time. So I think we have a good opportunity in that respect this year for publicity. So I think I'm really strongly suggesting people continue to do that aspect of things, even if people aren't visiting the site directly, making sure you still send out press releases, making sure you still submit video to organizations and pictures to different organizations. Next, please.
Any other questions? Any
Yeah.
other questions?
Yeah, go ahead,
I have one.
Sterling.
What do you say? So it seems to me that a majority of the clubs out there are just up and canceling their field day event in total. And I don't know if, as far as I've seen in the St. Louis area, we haven't seen any like alternatives, but I think there's some stuff in the works. Like instead of just operating in your backyard, clubs are seemingly like they want to like do more repeater stuff. They want to have like games. They want to have like you can do sprints and that sort of thing they're not quite field day, but it's kind of like an on the air event weekend for people who are or aren't operating, like a full on field day excursion. But what do you say? Do you have any advice to those clubs who've like just said,
Yes.
I'm canceling, we got to throw everything out the water and just forget amateur radio for the next couple months,
Yeah, I have three very specific things because this question has came up to me a number of times. One thing is, let's talk first about those other activities they were talking about. I strongly suggest that they design those activities so they still fall within the operating rules of field day so that they can still submit and have that aspect of it. You can still do the same sort of things, just make sure that you keep your rules aligned so that they'll fall into it. So instead of using repeater, make sure you're doing simplex type of contacts. There's a whole lot of things, and there's no reason you can't do these things throughout the year also. So I think that's one thing that's important. The other thing is, I know some clubs that are doing field day as groups, but in socially isolated situations where they're having just individual operators come. Individual operators are going to go to their location. They're going to set up a few limited stations and they're going to operate as a Class A station. You can do that. My biggest caution to those people is do not try and put up towers. Do not try and do any type of antenna installation that normally requires X number of people, because as I always say, the number of people necessary to put up a tower is the number you think plus the number 10. So I don't want to see people trying to do things that would be dangerous. Also, a lot of people said, well, there's no problem. I'm going to stay in my tent the whole time. Well, the problem is if you're going to set up as a group, you're going to be in close proximity while you're putting up things. So you have to be careful about that. Now, I could see where a number of members would come out. They all have portable stations like Class B, like I do. They could go out and go to a location where they're physically isolated from each other somewhat and operate as a Class A station by bringing a number of Bs in or by driving in their vehicles and then just throwing up antennas. So there's no reason you can't do that if you can find a location that A, is willing to let you do it, a public location that's not going to have a problem with doing it, and B, that there's still the support facilities that you need, like a restroom. So that's one of the things I think that a lot of clubs are getting frustrated about. And I think the biggest frustration is they see that they can't do it the way they've always done it. And for a lot of clubs, field day is a whole exercise in this is the way we do it every year. And I think this is actually a good thing in a way, because we're not going to be able to do things the way we did them every year this year. So I think it's a nice challenge. But a lot of clubs, instead of being challenged by that, are being frustrated and throwing their hands up in the air. And I'm also hearing this from a lot of clubs, which I really am disappointed to hear. Well, we're not going to score very well this year, or we're not going to win our category this year, or, you know, that category we compete in, we can't do that same category this year. And that I really don't like the idea that they focus everything on the competitive aspect. So I think that's a big thing. And as I said in those takeaway slides, I think it's really important to think about, if your contesting is really the most important thing about field day for your club, then do some other contests with your club too. Don't just do field day. Next question, please.
Yes. Go ahead, Rod.
Yeah, I have a comment. Sterling, in response to your comment there are some clubs, you know, that they get together for the social aspects of it. You know, the families are involved and so forth. And those are obviously a minority of the clubs, but there's other reasons. It's almost like radio is incidental to their field day, because they consider it to be a social outing and so forth. You know, there's potlucks and so forth. And if that's the sort of the direction that the club takes, you know, every year, I can see why there's some that would say, well, geez, since we can't get together, let's just bag it. But I would be willing to bet that there's, even within those group, there's some of the people that are real contesters, or ones that want to get on the radio, that would probably still get together to have a field day. But like you say, you know, when they say we're just going to bag the whole thing, I'd be willing to bet it's because it's more a real social activity that they're involved in, and the radio is just the reason for the social activity and the people getting together.
Yeah, I know a club near us that they have about 40 people to go out and do the setup, but when it comes time to operate, there's about 3 people that ever operate.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I got to go, but good presentation, Anthony, and I'll catch you guys all later. See ya. 7-3.
Just picking up on what Rod said, there's one club in the area where there are 4 clubs in the area where I live. One of them probably won't do anything. One of them, there are quite a few new members who are on the air on nets and things, probably haven't really done much contesting. And what that club's decided to do is to encourage every member to get on the air as either a 1D or 1E, to all put their scores in. It'll be the first time a lot of them have probably filed scores, and to get them to see that part of amateur radio through it as a sort of a club participation event. Because you're right, I was thinking of the comments that Sterling made as well. There are some people, and maybe Rod said it, you said it, that are used to doing it a certain way, and if they can't do it, they're not going to do it. But there are lots of ways to do it, and that's great stuff you've done.
That brings up another quick thing I want to mention. Some clubs have people, and I'm sure that you know this also, that there's certain people that they're really only interested in the technical aspect. They're not really interested in the operating aspect, or they're interested in antennas, or they're interested in this, but they're not really interested in operating. My suggestion for those clubs, so that those people don't feel left out, is set up a help desk. Have these people available for club members to contact for help. Maybe they don't want to operate during field day, but have them be there on the phone or on the repeater or whatever, so that when someone has a problem, they can ask them. So that'll make them feel involved in this, even though they might not, because they might not like to operate.
Okay, let me just throw a comment in here. One of the things our club has done for the last number of years is because we run anywhere between 9 and 12A, lots of different operating positions. One of the operating positions, which I've been a part of, 2 or 3 of us, we started an antenna challenge a few years ago, where every year we would use a different kind of antenna. And so a few years ago, I've challenged my good friend, David, VE3MDX. And I said, David, we need to put an antenna up on a balloon. 2 weeks later, he calls me up and says, tomorrow afternoon, could you drive over to such and such a park? I've got a tank of helium in my trunk. He has a Tesla, incidentally, which is a great emergency power source, let me tell you. Need a 50 amp power pole, and away you go. And so we used a balloon antenna that year. And of course, he had to take a little Arduino rig and instead have the thing blink Morse code, our club call sign, all night long as well. Another year, I got some fiberglass mass, and we used fiberglass mass to run delta loops. The following year, last year, actually, we used the fiberglass mass and just took some old scrap telephone wire and made it into a vertical for 40 and 20 and 15, and it worked just fine. So by doing this, one of the things we did do was engage the rest of the club members and saying, guys, you know, we have guys who have this idea that if the antenna isn't commercial and perfect, they can't operate, and say, guys, throw the wire up. This is called an antenna tuner. Use it. As long as the rig's happy and fooled, you don't care. Get out, get on the air. And it's been a great education experience. I'm sorry, I saw a hand. Yes.
You're unmute, Wooten.
Yeah, unmute. Space bar.
There we go. Is
Very
that
good.
it?
Yep.
I'm looking at the ARRL website field day locator. And you made a comment, Anthony, about putting your station locations on there for
Yes.
individuals. But it's saying that it's the show, it says down here in the note, the page is intended to show public field day sites that members of the public and media can visit.
That's old.
Okay, they haven't updated that.
I don't think they're going to. I don't think that there's not been a lot of, they've really not changed much for this year. One of their goals was to maintain the status quo and everything.
Okay.
So I would go ahead. I'm giving you permission to go ahead and do that. If they complain, tell them I told you to do it.
Okay, thanks very much.
And you can take a
Good
call.
job.
From,
And there's also a very good job on the presentation.
but
Well,
you can take the call from the journalists if they see your location.
I'll
Yeah.
be happy to. One of the things that has the operating class B, as my wife and I have done, one of the things that happens is we never know what we're going to be encountering when we get there. You know, we rent these places ahead of time, and other than looking at it from the top from Google Maps, I don't necessarily know what trees I'm going to have there. I don't know what's going to be in the way. So it's an adventure every time when I set up. It's a new adventure every year that makes me have to be flexible in my antenna abilities. And I always try and bring more than one antenna because I don't know what I'm going to get when I get there as far as setting up. So along the lines of what George was saying, every year my antenna setup is a little bit different. Now, last year in Vermont, I had a beautiful site. The problem was the hill behind me continued up and up and up. So I had no propagation to the west, but I had wonderful propagation to the east and north.
Other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, well, if not, thank you very, very much for participating tonight. I hope you all enjoyed it. And again, Anthony, thank you so much for volunteering to present tonight. Very interesting. And Augusto, thank you very much for doing all the work behind the scenes to make sure people got all the information, got registered. Our Region 2 website was kept up to date and all the other good stuff, which is hours and hours of work nobody ever appreciates. So with that, good night, and 73, please stay safe.
73, and please visit us next Wednesday for the FT8, FT4 if you're interested.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony, and great presentation, by the way. Very, very interesting. Thanks to everybody who joined us. And yeah, please, if you're interested in the FT8, FT4 next week, we're having it at the same time as this one. Thank you very much. Have a great night and be safe.
Augusto, I have a question.
Yes.
When is the next workshop in Spanish?
Next week we have FT8, FT4 in English, and the following one we have it in Spanish.
Yeah, Spanish 2 weeks.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I have some of the guys here don't want to miss that.
Yes, it's in 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. And
Thank you.
Great workshop. Thank you, Anthony.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks to everybody who went also on YouTube. It's good to have everybody here. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.